No, I was really excited when you reached out just because like I said with the especially with the diabetes community, I don't think there's enough resources out there. And I'm always willing to help people and like shine light as best as I can. Or, I've only really spoken to like two other diabetics in my my life. So to be able to connect people who might be feeling the same way or wondering if this, like, do other people feel this? Like, that was great, and I appreciate you reaching out and giving me the chance to share my story and my perspective on things.
So I thought we'd go ahead and start. If you could just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I am from Arizona. I've lived here my entire life. Big Sun Devil and Cardinals fan. And my husband and I just got married this year.
So we're here to talk about your journey, and so maybe you could talk a little bit about when you first realized something might be wrong.
Yeah, so I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when I was 8. So leading up to me being diagnosed, I was losing a lot of weight. My grandmother was actually the one who realized something was not right. Being around somebody all the time, like you might not see the weight loss, but she noticed that I was going to the bathroom constantly and I was constantly thirsty. So she had let my mom know, like, hey, I think you might need to take her in to be seen. And unfortunately, I never made it to my doctor's appointment. I was actually diagnosed on February 12th, like 2 days before Valentine's Day, with type 1 diabetes. So pretty much I ended up getting really sick. Just kept throwing up, couldn't hold anything down, to the point like I was throwing up like stomach acid, which happens when you don't have any substance in your system anymore. And then I was just very lethargic, which isn't like me, and especially for a kid in second grade, like kids have
Yeah,
energy.
yeah.
Um, my mom was like, I need to take her to the emergency room. So took me to one of the local hospitals here. They ran all types of testing. My blood sugar ended up being over 1200, which is insanely high. They were very surprised that I was even awake because they had said most patients who have, blood sugars at 400 or 500 are starting to have seizures, strokes, go into comas. And then I was transported over to Phoenix Children's Hospital and was at Phoenix Children's Hospital for about 2 weeks. I was in the ICU for about a week and then another week in just a normal room. But that's when I got a lot of my educational information and I started the process of like figuring out what I was going to do when I went home.
And I imagine your mom was taking care of a lot of the administrative work. What was explained to you at such a young age?
I mean, I was hooked up to IVs and stuff. And for me, I didn't know the difference with them coming in and drawing blood to like giving me shot. So I was put on with type 1 diabetes, like the biggest difference between type 1 and type 2 is my pancreas doesn't work at all. So I'm dependent on insulin through injections. And at the time, I just remember my mom coming in and kind of explaining to me like, hey, so when we leave, like we have a diet that we're gonna have to put you on. So they kind of got me used to the diet when I was in the hospital. I was on a strict 3 meals plus 3 snacks a day, but I could only eat certain foods and so much of them because I was on a carb count diet at the time. And then just explained to me like you're gonna be taking shots when you go home, and like when you're getting your finger pricked, we're gonna have to do that at home. So to that I understood, but like once I got home, I think realization set in like, oh, okay, like this is my life now. Like this is what I'm gonna do for the rest of my life.
And was it shocking to you? Were you afraid? Were you confused at all?
It's hard because I don't remember like at such a young age. Like I don't feel like I went through a lot of the same emotions maybe as somebody who would be diagnosed in their teens or early adulthood. I feel like most of the feelings I've had towards diabetes came later in my life, like in high school and now as an adult. But I just knew that I was different. I think that was the biggest thing, is that things that you enjoy as a kid, I missed out on a lot of things. I mean, for instance, when I went back to school after being in the hospital, you know, my classmates had bags of candy and stuff for me for Valentine's Day, and it was like I wasn't allowed to eat that anymore. Going trick or treating wasn't as fun anymore because I couldn't indulge in all the candy that I worked to go get. Birthday parties, I wasn't allowed to have, cake and ice cream, so it changed a lot of those things, and to that I knew I was different. But I also knew at the same time, like, I had to do this to stay alive. So I think early on, like, that responsibility of small sacrifices leading to me to live a healthier, happier life was instilled. With diabetes brings a lot of independence at such an early age. Like, it's crazy to think, at 8, 9 years old, I was having to be super healthy and take on that responsibility of, at this time I have to do this and I have to make sure that I'm not missing doses, and that can be a lot on a kid. But my grandparents were like the biggest support for me. As much as my mom and dad were there day to day, I would say my grandparents played a much bigger part in me being able to deal with the parts of being different, because my grandparents made it seem normal in a way. So like if we'd all be hanging out with my cousins and stuff, it wasn't like they would make a scene for me to get pulled away to go do this. Like, I don't know, they just made it a little bit easier. It's hard to describe in a way, but they just made things a lot easier.
And so, how did you work to integrate all the new things that you had to do into your normal routine?
I mean, it kind of changed everyone's lives because I wasn't the only child. I had, on my dad's side, it was me, and I had two other brothers and a sister. So all of us had to make changes. We were on a much stricter schedule with things. So like I would eat at 8 a.m., snack at 10 a.m., lunch at 12. So I was eating like every 2 hours, which everyone else kind of became accustomed to. So I think that helped because everybody was in somewhat of a transition when it came to food. I was a kid, so exercising wasn't much of a task. Now as an adult, we have jobs and other things going on. So unless you dedicate the time to exercise, most people don't. So I don't think the adjustments were too big of a deal necessarily. It was just more me personally having to deal with getting injections 3 times a day, getting my finger pricked 4 times a day. Those were the things that made a bigger difference in my day to day.
Sure, sure. And so over time, I imagine you got accustomed to the new routine. And talk to us about some of the treatments that you've had to go through, your interactions with healthcare professionals. How has that gone for you?
So with diabetes, it's kind of funny because I've had it for 23, almost 24 years. It'll be 24 years next month, which is crazy to think I've had it that long. So I feel like I've had it, like, it's hard for me not to think of a time when I wasn't diabetic, just because this is so second nature to me. But it also, in a way, it's hard to get used to because diabetes is always changing. I could have something not affect my blood sugars today, but if I ate it, 3 days from now, it could have a totally different effect on me. So I think with diabetes, you just have to always adapt. Like, it's great because technology is so much better than when I first got diagnosed. I remember my meter was like as big as my phone, to where
Okay.
now it's like really, really tiny. I was on 2 different types of insulin when I first got diagnosed. One was called regular and the other was NPH, which they don't make anymore. Once I got to like junior high or high school, I went on to what's called a sliding scale, which let me eat a little bit more freely. I wasn't on as strict of a diet because I think one of the challenges I faced was having to eat when you're not hungry.
Yeah.
Um, I hated food for the longest time because it was just like, another snack again. I'm not hungry, but I have to force this down. Um, and when I got to like junior high and high school, I wasn't on that type of a routine anymore. I got to eat a little bit more freely. And I was on a faster acting insulin to where I would just take insulin whenever I ate and adjust for that. Or if I got sick or had high blood sugars, I'd adjust there. And then fast forward to now, I actually got on an insulin pump earlier in 2020, which has completely changed my life. It's actually, so I have this attached to me at
Okay.
all times. It looks like a little, people ask me if it's a pager, but it's not. It's my pump. The things that I need for diabetes has always been there, and has evolved so much. As far as like healthcare goes, I've never had any issues like necessarily with the physicians I've seen. I remember all of my doctors being fantastic. Even my current doctor that I see, she's awesome. She caters to me as her patient as versus catering um, like she knows my lifestyle and like things that I have going on in my life. So we try to work my diabetes around that versus me having to work everything around my diabetes, which is great. I'm very fortunate for the healthcare that I have because diabetes is extremely expensive. I remember that growing up, my parents having lots of medical expenses and having to figure out financially how they can afford stuff because insulin, especially in the United States, without good health coverage, I don't know how people do it. Like I know for me, my costs would be in probably $1,000 at least a month, if not more, in supplies if I didn't have insurance. So
Yeah, understood, understood. And so you mentioned that you were, incorporating, the new technologies into your treatments, and that you managed to get a little bit more freedom as the technology improved. Talk about that transition, sort of from the strict diet to the less strict diet, and how that's evolved to today.
for sure. So when I first got on, like transitioned out of the strict regimen to more of a looser diet and options, I guess I had more options when I wasn't on set meal eating. It was a little bit of a dangerous time because when you've done something for so long and you've been so constricted and you're given a little bit of a looser leash, I guess you would say, tested my limits. Like in high school, especially, I saw how far I could go either without taking insulin, um, which is bad, like very, very bad. I had several hospital visits due to that because like I almost had convinced myself at a certain point that I had been misdiagnosed or like that I didn't have diabetes anymore because I was going days and sometimes like a week or so at a time without eating or like not eating but checking my sugars or doing my shots. And at first like wasn't having crazy blood sugars, but then once you do it so much and you're not getting what your body needs, then of course complications happened. Now being older, I've been able to know what foods affect me a certain way. Um, that's not to say there's times that like I don't eat food that I actually like and and want. I just know that I have to adjust for it. So I think for me, what really helped like as an adult was just recognizing that there's always going to be a sacrifice that I'm going to have to make. But again, like I can work my diabetes around me and my lifestyle and the things that I want versus making like my whole life diabetes,
And
which
and what are some of the things that you've done to contain the diabetes so that you can live the life that you want?
so the pump was a huge step for me because for people who don't know much about diabetes, so we have something called an A1C. Your hemoglobin A1C is an average of your blood sugars over a 3-month span. So for a diabetic, you want to be like 6 or less, which means your blood sugars are averaging 120 or less at a time, which those are really good numbers to have. For me, for a long time, I was running between 10 and 15 as my A1C, which means my blood sugars were running 2, 3, 400 on average. And it's really hard to fine tune your numbers when you don't have something to monitor what's happening within your body constantly. Um, Insulin levels change all the time, so I had mentioned earlier, like depending on what I eat, that can affect my sugar, stress, getting sick, like pretty much everything can affect my diabetes. But if I don't want to give myself 20 shots a day, your only option's a pump. So the cool thing with the pump is I have a sensor plus my pump. My sensor reads my glucose levels throughout the day and tells my pump what it is. And then I have settings in there based upon my body size, like my carb ratio, because my carb ratio would be different than yours, how that affects your sugars. So all of that helps fine tune and keep my numbers more steady, which in the long run is just going to help me live like a longer, more fulfilling life. Like 10 years ago, I wasn't the most healthiest. I wasn't taking care of my diabetes as well. And now I've had to deal with some side effects for that. So that's the other thing with diabetes is if you don't take care of yourself now, you might not see the effects today, but 10 years from now, you're going to be dealing with that. And so to pay it forward to my future self, I try to make changes and live as healthy as far as making sure I am eating on a daily basis. Um, Exercise has not been the strong my strongest suit, but it's something I've been trying to incorporate more lately, especially working from home almost the last year. So trying to stay more active. And my A1Cs have been around 6 the last few times that I've gone. And that's all because of the pump. Like the pump really got me to where I am with my diabetes right now.
No, that's wonderful, wonderful. So could you talk a little bit about, you mentioned some complications, and I know that sort of your sugars were 10 to 14 previously. What
Mhm.
sort of effects did you feel and did you notice? And maybe a lot of it wasn't noticeable.
So like the immediate side issues that I had with high blood sugar was like I had mentioned, I had several hospital visits, which were all DKA visits, which stands for diabetes ketoacidosis. And pretty much what can happen in those situations for a diabetic is if your blood sugar gets to be so high and you develop ketones and like sugar in your urine, like my organs function the same way as yours does, and it doesn't recognize that my pancreas doesn't work. So like if you're getting sick and your liver, kidneys are spilling out sugar to help offset that, mine's doing the same thing, but you have the insulin triggering to kind of balance that out to where I don't. So what'll happen is that my levels will just get really high. Usually I throw up a lot, can't hold anything down. My heart rate is super high, and I'm pretty much putting myself at risk for heart attack, seizure, strokes, things like that. So during those hospitalizations, I'm always, they're pumping up my fluids because my heart rate's really high and I'm dehydrated. Um, I get really sick and exhausted, lose oxygen to your brain, so you're just not as sharp. And those were more the immediate effects of poor habits and not taking care of myself. As far as like the 10 years later situation, this earlier in 2020, I started noticing I was having really weird spots in my left eye. So I had to go see a specialist. Um, and luckily, I don't have like glaucoma, I don't have diabetes, retinopathy. But because of being diabetic for as long as I had and I wasn't controlled for a long time, I started developing additional blood vessels in my eye. So, I mean, you shouldn't, your body's not supposed to produce more blood vessels like once you have them. But I started growing more blood vessels, which hemorrhaged and leaked. And that's why I was seeing spots and having trouble with my vision. So, pretty much for the last 8 months, I've had to go in, um, get testing done every month. I've had 5 different eye injections done. I've had a laser treatment done. So those are all effects of just having diabetes for 20 plus years and having a chunk of that not being healthy.
Sure. And how long would you say that you were sort of less well controlled?
Um, for a good portion, I would say from like 17, 18 was when I really kind of had a downward spiral with my diabetes up until about 22 or 23. I also had made some poor life decisions during that time, which compromised me being able to live a healthier lifestyle. And that really took an impact, obviously. But I've spent the last, 8 years working really hard to be healthier. And I can definitely tell, like, I feel better. I have more energy. I sleep better. That's a huge thing when your blood sugars are all over the place. It's really hard to get good sleep. Um, and I don't know, like overall, I can just feel a difference.
Perfect. So in addition to the pump, what else have you done to change your life?
Um, well, like I said, like 10, almost 10 years ago, I was in a relationship with somebody that was not um, good for me in any way. So taking the necessary steps to get out of that was huge. Like I could almost guarantee I probably wouldn't even be sitting here right now if I hadn't taken that big step. So for my health, like that was a huge thing is like I needed to make sure I was taken care of. So I did that. Which allowed me to start surrounding myself with more people, develop some really amazing friends over the last 7, 8 years. And with diabetes, you really need a lot of support. My husband, we've been together for 7 years, and he's been a huge, him and his family are fantastic and amazingly supportive. But him specifically, like just taking the time to learn and educate himself on diabetes and just how it affects me to the point like he can tell like if I'm low or like he's just I don't know, he's just a really good partner because at any given point if I'm like hey, I'm feeling shaky, he's up and will grab me juice or if I haven't eaten in a while, hey, when's the last time you ate something? You probably should have a snack. And those little things go a long ways. Any person who's diabetic will tell you like that type of stuff is huge because diabetes is a 24/7 battle. Like there's no downtime, there's no pumping, like pushing the pause button and say, hold on, I just want to take a moment to breathe. Doesn't matter what's going on in your life, it's always there, um, which can be challenging depending on the circumstances, but it's really great to have a partner that can help you out with that type of.
So, it sounds like you've had tremendous support. Sounds like you have the right enabling technology with the monitor. What recommendations and advice do you have for folks living with diabetes and sort of give them sort of a sense of how you've managed to get to the great place that you are now?
I mean, I would be lying if I said I didn't have, emotional or mental times where like I'm breaking down or like I'm just loathe my diabetes because I do. There's like this morning I had to get up to change out my site and I was just like, oh, I don't want to do this. Like there's always going to be moments like that, but I think if you just allow yourself to feel those things versus trying to suppress them, that goes a long way. Because I think for me for a long time I wouldn't allow myself to be negative about diabetes. And that probably is like kind of sounds weird when I'm trying to motivate people, but I think like just being honest with your feelings and thoughts about it is a huge step. But then realizing, okay, like this is a small thing in the grand scheme of things for me to live life and be happy and to be as normal as possible. Um, and because there's so few of us, like type 1 diabetics, there's so few of us, um, just taking those opportunities to interact with one another. That's why I've been a little bit more active on Reddit lately because, like, I mean, trying to find a local group here in Arizona, like, it's not the same. Like, it's really tough seeking out other diabetics because when you throw diabetes out there, like, it's heavily type 2. Like type 2 diabetes is much more common. There's so many more people that have it. So if anything, it's just like regardless of where you're at, maybe start trying to develop a larger community or a larger resource for people. Making sure you have somebody in your life that you can talk to openly about what you go through. I mean, I'm definitely fortunate that I have, my husband and I have really good friends and family that I feel confident I could go to and confide in whenever I need to, or if I need to complain, like I just need a moment to complain, they'll allow it to happen. So like just having an outlet to be able to talk freely about what you do and the thoughts that you have, but just making sure that you remind yourself that diabetes isn't your life, that diabetes is a part of your life. I had a hard time with that for the longest time. I felt like diabetes ran my life. And once I was able to change that perspective and was like, you know what? No, like this isn't who I am. This doesn't define me. It's helped shape me into who I am, but I can still do everything that I want, but just make accommodations here and there for my disease.
Wonderful. No, well, first of all, thank you so much for the great advice, for sharing your journey in all its candor. The purpose of healthfulheroes.com is exactly this. By sharing our stories, we hopefully motivate and inspire others living with chronic conditions to live better lives and to take their health into their own hands. And so I'm very happy for you. Congratulations. You've done wonderfully with your diabetes and managing through and getting to a wonderful place today. And look forward to helping to educate and inspire others with your journey. So thank you so much, Chasity. Thank you
You're
so
very welcome. Of course. Good luck with everything. Thank you.
Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.
You too.
Bye-bye.